Hey everybody, welcome back to another Nature's Always Right episode. Today I'm at my friend Diego Footer's house at his amazing home garden. You've probably gotten to see it on his YouTube channel where he does a ton of amazing content all about regenerative gardening and farming practices, and lots of interviews also with other farmers. We're gonna get to take a look at all the awesome things he's doing out here. He's doing lots of experiments with biochar, different cover cropping methods, and he recently did a soil test of this garden that he's been building for the last 5 or 6 years, and his soil tests are pretty impressive. And of course he's been doing everything no-till since he set up his garden, and just been using natural nutrients, compost, and all that sort of stuff. So we'll get into all that with him, and I'll put all the links for his content down in the description. All right, Diego, we're in your super tall cover crop here, and if we look down at the lower part of your garden, you've got a couple varieties of cover crops as well. You're doing some interesting experiments out here. Please tell us more.
Sure, yeah, my name's Diego. I do a podcast, I have a YouTube channel, and I'm kind of a hobbyist grower that's turning up the dial on my experimentation and testing of a lot of things I've learned over the years from interviewing people and reading books. These are my garden beds. They're not production beds, they're gardens, so they're purely for hobby. But what I am trying to do is build soil from this point forward by only importing really seeds. Not compost, not organic fertilizers, nothing like that. It's just stuff that I can produce on site. So I'm using cover crops to do that. And this is a strategy that I got turned on to by John Jevons, who wrote he's founder of the Grow Biointensive method, How to Grow More Vegetables. I love his work. And his idea that he's worked on over the past 40 years is you grow a cover crop, you chop that cover crop down, leaving the roots in the soil, and then you compost that cover crop in a compost pile, either on the bed that you're going to be growing or away. It's not a chop and drop per se, where I wouldn't chop all these beds down and leave the cover crop there. I'm going to chop them down, move the material somewhere else, compost it, and then add the material back to the beds. There's some reasons for that, more than I can get into here. But the jungle I'm standing between here is mustard. So this is the cover crop I've used in these two beds. I'm doing an experiment here. 4 rows of mustard on a 30-inch bed, 3 rows of mustard on a 30-inch bed. Mustard's cheap. It has some nematode resistance properties that from exudates in the soil. It can germinate really well in cooler temperatures, and these plants are probably 4 feet high in the middle of winter for me here in Southern California, so they produce obviously a lot of biomass. The idea here now is they're at the stage where they're going to be cut. I don't want them to go to flower because I don't want this to ever seed. So I'm going to cut them back, compost the tops, and then leave the bottoms just enough above the ground, probably 6 to 8 inches. So hopefully they can grow back and I can get a second cut off of them without having to buy a second set of seeds or lose that time from seeding. Down here I have vetch that I'm growing to fix nitrogen. The other main crop that I'm using is fava beans and tillage radish. To try and really get some biomass down into the soil and some poorer areas of soil. I like the idea of radish because you get a big tillage radish being daikon radish, so you can get a big tuber down into the ground, leave that there, let it rot in place, feed the microbiology, loosen up the soil. It's a clay soil where I have a lot of that. So that's where I'm going with cover crops right now.
Beautiful. Maybe you could cover just real quickly just what you've been doing to the soil the last 5 to 6 years here, and then tell us what your soil test was, because it was a pretty awesome result.
Yeah. So if you look over here, you get a good profile of what the soil was originally. This is a pretty barren hillside from the beginning. This used to be an avocado grove if we go back 50 years. When they built this house here, I think they scraped all the topsoil off and pushed some of it down this way. But the soil when I moved in was really thin, to the point in like January, you couldn't even get a shovel into some parts, like concrete hard. I remember trying to plant trees using like a digging bar just to hollow out a bowl to put some of these pomegranates and things in. So I started with really bad soil. I didn't till at the time, I don't till now. And I decided, okay, my strategy to do this, to fix this, is to build up. And that worked in a few advantages for me. One, I was able to get a flat area on a slope because I have terrace walls here that are rock. So essentially behind those walls, I've just built up over time. So the surface of the initial hillside of the tight poor soils here I have a wall coming up, and I have this whole area in here which has been filled. I'm lucky we have a good source of relatively inexpensive municipal compost in Oceanside, the next town over. So for the longest time, I would take a minivan down there, put trash cans in the back, fill those trash cans, and come up and just layer compost on the beds. And over time, I grazed chickens on it, planting cover crops in, and slowly just layer by layer by layer, these soils in some areas are probably 3 to 4 feet higher than they initially started at. And digging in here is now no problem at all. But if you were just to step to the side where the beds aren't, digging would have been a major problem. So yeah, when I did the soil test, it was shocking, but maybe not shocking. Like I came back on the lower beds at around 12.5% organic matter in the soil. Nitrogen was classified as very high, and I don't really add organic fertilizer. So that's, I think, a lot from the biology. These beds I'm standing on was slightly lower at about 8.5% organic matter. So it's really high, but it has been this strategy over time of just layer, layer, layer on. From people like Ruth Stout going way back to a lot of the Rodale methods of mulching, whether you're using compost or wood chips or whatever. I think the fastest way to build the soil is to go up versus trying to go down. Obviously, you got to have a lot of organic material to put on top, but if you can get it, I think you can see spectacular results very fast. And now I'm hoping, okay, like I've borrowed resources from somewhere else long enough, because that's the downside of bringing in compost that you don't make. Like, you're stealing nutrients from wherever that compost originated. You're depleting that land to make that compost to put on your land. Okay, I get there's a lot of waste out there, but now I'm at the point where, okay, soil levels are good, soil heights are good. I don't need a lot more physical soil in here, so I'm gonna try and grow my own compost and maintain fertility here, and then see where does my fertility level go without adding organic fertilizers, without adding organic amendments, and only from compost being recycled on site. So my input is seeds, but all of the stuff I'm growing, like this mustard, gets composted, introduced back to the soil. I guess the only outside amendment would be scrap lumber that I'm using to make biochar that goes into the beds, but relatively minimal in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, that is just so cool, Diego, to see that you've just gone from, horrible garbage soil to now, anything over 10% or close to 10% is amazing soil. So I just love seeing more and more evidence and people, doing this, using natural systems by mimicking nature, using cover crops, bringing in, the inoculants via compost, and just letting the biology do the work. And it's really is true. And I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of us that have done this now. So yeah, just keep up the good work.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a patient approach too. Like, you got to take time. I think where you start to cheat is if you want results right away. But if I look back, like, this happened relatively quickly over 5 or 6 years, but 6 years to wait for soil to improve, it's kind of a long time for a lot of people. But given those results of doing that over a long period of time, I think results are great.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you pointed out that now that you're at this level of fertility, you can even back off a bunch. You don't even really need to add in that much compost. And at the No-Till Growers Workshop with Frith Farms, Daniel Frith, his organic matter at his farm's at 12%, and now he's not even, he'll go through cycles where he's not adding compost at all. He just seeds directly to the next crop. He does a cover crop, I know, every year in all his beds, or most of his beds, but it seems like once you get to this certain level of fertility, it becomes like stable. It's like a forest. It becomes this more stable ecosystem, and now it's just this more maintenance thing. Where, and then your plants just grow amazingly. So. Yeah,
which makes sense. I mean, that's a lot of systems. Like, to charge a system, like, it's going to take some time, and then to kind of maintain, like, it's almost like endurance for humans. Like, if you do a lot of running, like, it takes a while to build up endurance, but eventually you kind of hit that peak, and now you're just maintaining, and that's how I look at it. But I think where some people can get caught in the trap, and I'm almost there, try not to be, is you can keep wanting to add compost and make it better without saying what's good enough. Like, what does it matter if it's 12% or I don't even know what the upper limit would be on functional soil that can grow. Let's say it's 20. Well, is there a need to go to 20? Probably not. So there's a time cost to trying to get it to 20. There's a stress cost. There's a work cost. If you enjoy it, do it. But there has to be a point where you say, hey, I'm here. Now let's enjoy it. Let's maintain what we have, and let's try and not go down, or at least slow the rate of going down so the input levels can go down as well.
So yeah, I mean, you guys already know that's my whole philosophy, and that's where I see the future of organic or biological based farming going, is these concepts that we're talking about right here, biochar and inoculating with all the microbes, using cover crops and nature to achieve fertility. You have to wait a little bit longer, but in the end, man, I think it's totally worth it, just like human health, like we kind of discussed there.
And relatively low work. I mean, I'm going to do the work to plant these. I use the seeder, not a ton of work. I have to harvest them. Okay, that's going to be a fair amount, but the plant's doing most of it. Like I seeded these probably 2 months ago now. You know, I haven't done anything with them for 2 months, so it's nice to have a system that's like helping the soil, and you're just like, you can look out and watch it and be like, ooh, look at how big the plants are getting. It's great.